In this roundup of a week, coronavirus leads to some serious international punch-ups as solidarity and cooperation gets thrown out of a window in the names of national interest. The UK police can't help but show enthusiasm for the idea of a police state, and David Icke's conspiracy theories challenge our notions of commitments to free speech. My name is Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show for Changemakers. It's been another week, living in the glitch in the matrix that is 2020. I hope you're well and are staying safe. Last week we explored some of the arguments about what the figures do or don't tell us about the nature of the coronavirus and whether society responded correctly, not fast enough, or way too far. It's remained a talking point with a few new voices added to the chorus on one side or the other. Nothing much has really developed or changed on that score, except perhaps that I've just become even more aware of what junk data we're trying to evaluate any of this with. Countries are not testing on the same basis, so their figures on cases of infection are completely non-comparable. For one figure you'd think would be solid, the number of deaths from coronavirus are in actual fact all over the place, with some countries counting everybody who died with the virus, regardless of the role of other pre-existing conditions, some missing out a bunch of people and attributing their deaths to those pre-existing conditions, some are only counting those that die in hospital, others, France for example, started that way and then chucked a load of additional deaths from people in care homes that had originally been missed out. And the time lag in reporting is completely inconsistent. The number of days before deaths are counted can vary significantly, even within the same country. So though we're all looking at graphs trying to see the faint signs of emerging trends from the curves, ultimately we're looking at a big fat bundle of noise. One thing we do know is that countries with relatively small populations have had the opportunity to shut things down tight early on and successfully contain the spread. New Zealand, for instance, dived on it straight away, shut the country to visitors and locked people down tight. And right now it's seeming that that approach has worked for them. The country has falling numbers of new cases and has so far suffered from just one death. Now they're starting to look ahead at how the measures could be phased downwards. Likewise Denmark, which went into early lockdown, seen significant success and is likewise looking towards how it can begin to pull out, in a way that doesn't simply result in a second, maybe larger wave. The interesting question that some are raising is this: have these countries perhaps been too successful too early? Viral disease expert at the University of Copenhagen, Professor Alan Thompson, argued that Denmark's suggest might counterintuitively mean that it has to keep restrictions in place for longer. He said this: for fewer people who get infected, the longer it takes before the epidemic has infected enough people that there is broad immunity in the population. Which kind of suggests that the only value of moving early and hard in this situation is if you can actually get to the point of eliminating the virus completely from within your borders. Otherwise, all you may be doing is prolonging the period during which the vulnerable are most at risk, and you're going to get the same number of deaths anyway. In the meantime, Sweden keeps on doing the exact opposite. Its Prime Minister still resisting the criticisms from outside and within that the policy of allowing people to carry on with their normal lives, but with some social distancing measures added in, that this is leading to more deaths. Sweden is seeing significant numbers increasing, although it's still behind some of the worst affected European countries on a per capita basis. But what we don't know is whether they'll end up with their curve coming down a lot sooner than those that have more vigorously held the numbers down. What if, at the end of all of this, the countries that acted early end up in exactly the same place as Sweden, except that their actions did significantly more damage to their economy in the process of getting there? And you know the answer to that question? The answer is, we don't know. And we're not going to know until it all plays out. For all that, political opportunists, the likes of Rupert Read in the UK, are jumping onto their governments and accusing them of killing people because of how they did or didn't respond. The answer is that our information isn't good enough, and our point in time isn't sufficiently advanced to know for sure what's going to prove to have been the best approach. In due course, we'll all be pontificating with the benefit of hindsight and pretending like we knew it all along. But not for a while. In the UK, we had a sharp reminder that it's not just the elderly with pre-existing conditions that are at risk when Prime Minister Boris Johnson was taken into intensive care with the virus. That was a shock to the system for a lot of people. As it happened, although he needed oxygen support, he didn't have to go onto a ventilator. In the UK, once you get onto a ventilator, your chance of emerging from there is down at no better than 50-50, which at least is better than apparently it's been in New York, where 80% of patients on ventilators have been dying. Why such a big difference? A very good and important question. Now, at the time of making this video, Johnson has been moved back out of intensive care. So now all the talk is about how quickly he'll be able to recover to retake his role at the head of government. And by and large, apart from a few ideologically blinded activists, everyone on all sides of the political divide have been united in genuinely wishing him a speedy recovery. And that's something to take heart from in these polarised times. We are still in an age where common humanity beats tribalism. You wouldn't think it if you made the mistake of believing that Twitter is real life, but there you go. That lack of tribalism hasn't been translated onto the world stage, where we've seen real conflicts breaking out. For instance, we learned exactly what President Trump might mean by the slogan America First, when the US apparently had a shipment of masks that was en route to Berlin, Germany via Thailand, diverted and sent instead to the US. It was an action the Berlin Interior Minister described as modern piracy. This is no way to treat transatlantic partners. Even in times of global crisis, there should be no Wild West methods. The Trump administration denied any knowledge of such a seizure. And this came as a number of countries complained about Americans dominating a free-for-all as everyone scrabbles to get their hands on essential equipment. One of the French regional presidents, Valérie Pécresse, said, "I found a stock of masks that was available and Americans, I'm not talking about the American government, but Americans outbid us. They offered 3 times the price and they proposed to pay up front. I can't do that. I'm spending taxpayers' money and I can only pay on delivery having checked for quantity." Of course, this is what happens when the whole world needs certain resources because of a sudden global problem and there's limited supply. Here's the thing, not everyone's going to get what they need. So how do these resources get rationed? The answer is they don't. We have no global authority to do the rationing. By and large, none of us want global government. So we're back to the old way. The powerful dominate. Not in terms of armed conflict, fortunately, but in terms of money. Maybe that wouldn't have been the case in the era of US presidents that saw their role genuinely as being the leader of the free world. Maybe the attitude was different then. We don't know, because it was never tested in exactly the way it's being tested now. But we've seen it playing out in various ways. Another was India, deciding to ban the export of the drug that President Trump had identified as a likely effective drug to beat the coronavirus. All the experts are saying that there's no evidence currently to support it, but Trump has pushed the line hard, and a lot of people want to believe it. So when India put restrictions on the export of hydroxychloroquine, Trump quickly jumped in and threatened retaliation. In the Wild West, bullying backed by power works, and India quickly backed down and is providing the drug to the United States. If it turns out that that drug does indeed prove to be effective in treating COVID-19, that's probably Trump's re-election platform right there. The other international tension has involved the World Health Organization. Trump accused the WHO of being pro-China and having given bad advice, and has threatened to cut off the US element of funding to the body. Some have been suggesting that this is just Trump trying to pass the blame for the situation where the US is now seeing thousands of deaths daily. But others are saying, well, he has a point. And he does. Because like any of these global agencies, politics is completely interwoven into whatever mission the agency is supposed to fulfill. The previous WHO Director General was Margaret Chan, a Chinese national. Her successor, Tedros Ghebreyesus, an Ethiopian, was China's preferred candidate. Perhaps that's part of the reason why the WHO took China's early assurances that there was no big problem to worry about when it was alerted to a new disease in Wuhan. The WHO had been alerted to the fact that it was in fact a serious problem with human-to-human transmission by Taiwan in late December. However, China refuses to recognise Taiwan, and so neither does the World Health Organization. Taiwan is one of the countries that's responded best to the coronavirus, limiting its fatality rate to just 5 deaths with some early and vigorous action. Well, you won't find any information about that on the WHO website. There was a telling video a month or so ago that showed a WHO advisor being asked about Taiwan and pretending to have lost the connection in order to avoid answering.
Consider Taiwan's membership. Hello?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
So the WHO didn't pass on Taiwan's warning, instead it stuck to China's line. And most crucially, it didn't encourage any travel bans. China was keen to avoid disruption to travel and put in place screening at the airports, which made it look like things were under control while not discouraging international travel. In late January, Italy and then the US imposed a travel ban from Wuhan. Trump was condemned for xenophobia by the Democrats in the US. Politico reported at the time. The Trump administration's quarantine and travel ban in response to the Wuhan coronavirus could undercut international efforts to fight the outbreak by antagonizing Chinese leaders, as well as stigmatizing people of Asian descent, according to a growing chorus of public health experts and lawmakers. And what's more, the move was criticized by the World Health Organization. The Secretary General said that travel bans would have the effect of increasing fear and stigma with little public health benefit. The argument behind the WHO's reluctance to support travel bans is that measures that hurt countries in that way may discourage them from being open about events and instead take steps to conceal outbreaks, which is an understandable political concern, but not one that justifies allowing a bunch of infected people to fly around the world, surely. As it happens, you had criticisms of Trump for early banning travel from China. You had criticisms of Trump for not banning fast enough travel from elsewhere. You had criticisms in the UK for not banning travel fast enough. Basically, whatever a government does in this situation is going to attract criticism because opponents can always say that the other way would have been better. Don't get me wrong, I think Trump's leadership in this situation has been pretty dismal, and I'm not one of the Orange Man Bad brigade. A study was recently carried out that suggested that Democrats were less likely to obey social distancing restrictions imposed by a Republican governor and vice versa for Republicans with a Democrat governor. If the US ends up with a worse curve than any other country in the world, it'll arguably be because of both sides of the polarisation divide, not just the actions of the current inhabitant of the White House. Effective measures need to have cross-party support. Nevertheless, press conferences where the president goes on about the ratings for his press conference have not been a glorious sight, let's face it. And that cross-party support is the way that it's worked out in many other countries, including, thankfully, the UK. Although the UK has had its own issues. The Chief Constable of Northamptonshire Police was in a plain-talking mood yesterday. He was praising the compliance and restraint of the vast majority of the public, but you know that's just the preamble to getting on to the bad people. And he went on to say this.
I do want to make the point, though, that my message to the police officers here is one of common sense and discretion, as I said before, so we will not at this stage be setting up roadblocks. We will not at this stage be starting to marshal supermarkets and checking the items in baskets and trolleys to see whether it's a legitimate, necessary item. But again, be under no illusion, if people do not heed the warnings and the pleas that I'm making today, we will start to do that.
Yes, if you don't behave in Northamptonshire, the police will start demanding to look in your shopping bags to check whether or not you have items that aren't essential. Bag of potatoes? Check. Bag of toilet roll? Check. Chocolate Easter egg? Not essential! I mean, who knows? At the end of last month, police told certain small convenience stores they couldn't stock Easter eggs because they weren't essential. That was quickly contradicted because, of course, there are no government rules dictating what products convenience stores are or are not allowed to sell. And consequently, the police have no powers to dictate it. Neither do they have powers to go through your shopping to spot items that are less than essential. It is, after all, that we're aiming to reduce people's exposure to infection risk, not that we're aiming to squeeze every last vestige of joy out of life just for the sheer hell of it. After an unsurprising and sizable social media backlash, the Chief Constable clarified that they weren't talking about spotting individual items, but judging whether your journey overall was essential. This was reinforced by the official Northants Police Twitter account, by this time sounding positively cheesed off. To clarify some suggestions made in the media, we absolutely will not be searching people's shopping trolleys in Northamptonshire. Obviously, it's very unfair that the media have made such incorrect allegations.
Starting to marshal supermarkets and checking the items in baskets and trolleys to see whether it's a legitimate, necessary item.
Oh no, that's right. They're saying it because that's what you said. But good that they backtracked so quickly. Inexplicably, Cambridgeshire Police then managed to wade into the whole mess with this tweet sent out just this morning. Officers visited Tesco Bar Hill this morning. Good to see everyone was abiding by social distancing and the non-essential aisles were empty. In the aftermath on the inevitable and fully deserved backlash on that one, they quickly posted a follow-up. For clarification, the force position in line with national guidance is that we are not monitoring what people are buying from supermarkets. This message was sent with good intentions by an over-exuberant officer who has been spoken to since this tweet was published. Perhaps over-exuberance is the other epidemic sweeping the nation, because there was also a video showing police confronting a family for letting their children play outside in their own front garden. I kid you not. The question is, when the rules are pretty basic, reasonably quick and easy to describe, why do there seem to be so many over-exuberant police officers going up to Chief Constable level who need to be reminded of them? I've seen nowhere any suggestion that we have massive problems of large numbers of people joining the queue for supermarkets just in order to buy My Little Pony makeup sets or whatever. I dare say there's a couple would have done it. Not aware it's a major problem. People are pointing at idiots mingling in parks and not keeping social distancing. Sure, that's a problem because it's a direct infection risk. And there's lots of people tempted to do it because of the nice weather. Police, you get licence to deal with that. But that's what it is, licence. The reason why people are getting exercised about all of this is because, of course, we are seeing how easy it is to slip into a police state mindset. On the continent, that is to some extent a part of life. The police are agents of the government, a wing of the military, in essence. They will follow the government's decrees and enforce their wishes. Britain's not structured like that. The British police are basically civilians in uniform. They police by consent, they enforce the law, not the decrees of ministers. And by and large, they do a great and professional job in really difficult circumstances. There are plenty of good police officers having to endure some real idiocy and even dangerous behaviour by people overreacting to the current situation. But we've also seen some examples of overzealous policing. We have extraordinary times. People need to knuckle down and follow the rules. I absolutely 100% support that and have done so from the beginning. That is not a cover for police to start enforcing arbitrary rules beyond either what their instructions require nor indeed what's sensible to do. If you want to lose the support of the British people for lockdown and all the rest of it, then enforcing arbitrary, ridiculous, heavy-handed readings of the rules, it's a surefire way to do it. Now, the government knows this, and it's been quick to try to rein in the police exuberance. The Prime Minister's department said that people are allowed to buy whatever they want from shops that remain open, and they can use their own gardens as they wish. Good news? Shouldn't be necessary that the government has to say it. I do take some comfort from the wider response and the rapid climb downs. Chief constables in a genuine police state don't get shamed by Twitter into doing a U-turn. Is it the worst problem? No. There are a lot more idiots putting people in danger than there are police crossing the boundaries. We support those people being dealt with. Like the guys who were caught on camera licking their hands and touching food in the supermarket and various products. I mean, what the actual... Those people should be licking the bars on the window of a jail cell as far as I'm concerned, because they're knowingly putting people at risk of contracting something that could kill them. Those are the real morons, and those are the ones we want the police to be focusing on. Those, and perhaps the ones setting fire to 5G masts in the remarkably dumb belief that somehow a virus can be caused by mobile phone signals. And how would they get that idea, you might ask? A question that's also topical this week, and also connected to a question about official control and how far should it go. This story involved one David Icke. Ah yes, David Icke, the former footballer who became a spokesperson for the Green Party in the late 1980s before one day announcing that actually he was the son of God. He's calmed down since then, and he's just become one of the most prolific spreaders of the most ridiculous conspiracy theories probably on the planet. We're talking full on the world is controlled by lizard people type conspiracies. And apparently that includes his support for the idea that 5G signals spread the coronavirus, except that apparently in his view the coronavirus doesn't actually exist. Anyway, it's all a big conspiracy, and no doubt it makes sense the way that he tells it. There was a long video of him recorded by London Real and put out on London Live TV network, plus YouTube and Vimeo. This made news because the UK's broadcasting regulator, Ofcom, launched a formal investigation into the programme after it was broadcast, having received 40 complaints from members of the public. That was then followed by YouTube taking it down, following its recently revised stricter rules on videos held to be spreading dangerous misinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic. It was then uploaded to Vimeo, and Vimeo promptly deleted it as well. Currently it sits only on BitChute, the service whose mission statement seems to be the place that you can still find things that have been banned everywhere else. Now, this is an interesting challenge, it seems to me, to my frequently avowed commitment to free speech. So come on, Mallen, my mischievous alter ego is demanding. You've said that climate critics should be able to publish uninterfered with on YouTube. The answer to bad speech is more free speech, you said. Well, what about this one then, eh? Do you condemn David Icke's nonsensical and arguably dangerous COVID-19 disinformation being taken down? Do ya? Do ya? In law, there's a limit to free speech, which is held to be entirely practical and pragmatic. Free speech doesn't cover shouting fire in a crowded cinema when there is no fire. It doesn't include direct incitement to violence. As always, the question is, where do you draw the line? The hosting services have taken this video down because we're in a time of global crisis and giving people patently false information about the nature of the pandemic in a way which may lead them to decide to take actions that put themselves and others in harm's way is not considered a valid exercise of free speech. In the same way that preventing the shout of fire in a crowded cinema is about protecting people from the consequences of false information. I understand that. And of course, they're not public broadcasters, they're private companies. They're not required to ensure free speech on their platform. But, on what grounds would you ban David Icke? Because he's wrong? You'd have to take down half of the internet, except the first 10 years would be spent arguing about which half. Because his position is fantastical and nonsensical? Almost everybody believes that about at least one of the great world religions. Only people who think that they're all equally true at the same time would not be left with the implication of needing to remove a lot of content in the most controversial circumstances. Because his video encourages people to go and torch mobile masts, but he doesn't directly call for people to do that. It may be a logical conclusion of some of the arguments he makes, but then violent action is the logical conclusion of Extinction Rebellion's arguments, that the actions of governments mean that the children of today might not get to grow old. I have criticised and attacked such sentiments over and over and over. Not once have I ever called for them to be banned from the platform. We have mass communication going on, all official mainstream media and many blogger and vlogger channels as well, reinforcing the current government positions on lockdown in the face of the pandemic. If we're so scared that all of that communication is seriously threatened by a lone nutjob who said that 9/11 was nothing to do with Islamic terrorism and all to do with a plot for worldwide domination, what sort of situation are we in? Now, of course, David Icke is delighted that his videos have been banned. The Barbara Streisand effect is in full swing, and that video has had way more views than it ever merited or would have got as a result of achieving the status of something that they don't want you to see. Terrified elite declare war on David Icke. The people are speaking and overcoming YouTube Vimeo David Icke virus video ban by sharing the link. Now 4 million have watched it. Now it's not rocket science. If your problem is a video that appeals to conspiracy theorist minded folks, which approach is going to give that video the most power? Probably getting all the powerful platforms to band together to take it down. That's going to do the job, isn't it? So anyway, you might turn around and say, well then, Mallen, you're not prepared to ban David Icke. There's really nothing you're prepared to suggest should be banned then. Well, there is a line. Videos that call on people to commit acts of violence, obviously. Videos that called on people to join organisations set up to carry out terrorism, yes. And then you ask, what about if Icke had specifically said to people, because coronavirus doesn't exist, you should ignore what the government tells you to do? And the answer is yes, that would cross the line. Because it would be encouraging people directly to take action that didn't just put themselves at risk, but which made it more likely they might become the vehicle that passed an infection onto people who would die because of it. Doesn't the mere act of suggesting it's a fake or a conspiracy do that implicitly? Possibly, but you have to draw a line. And the place you can draw it, that you can then operate consistently, is that you draw it where people actively call upon people to do things that will harm themselves or other people. If I tell you gravity is just a construct, I'm not telling you to test it out by jumping out of a window. People ultimately have to be responsible for their own actions. And if you do something utterly stupid and reprehensible, like setting fire to a mobile phone mast, it won't be a defence in court to say David Icke made me do it. So that's where I sit. The truth is there are no comfortable places to sit when it comes to these questions. Nevertheless, I hope you sit comfortably this week. My name's Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show.